we've done a lot of studies. I think what Charles is talking about is the creation and formation of a policing system. Before, we are told it was brutish, it was selfish, it was anarchy. Then at some point, the citizens of that small country called UK decided to surrender their policing powers to an organized organization called police. So it is true they surrendered their policing powers to an organization they created called a policing system, so that the police were given powers by the people to police over the rest of the people. The word used was actually surrendering their individual and collective powers of policing themselves to an entity called police. That was the beginning of the policing the way we know it today. So it is true, it's not about our constitution, it's not about what we do now, but the creation of policing started from what you were saying. So the people of UK at that time, it was never called UK, I don't know what it was called. That was the creation of the police. That's how the policing started. So we surrendered our powers, both individual and collective, created a mechanism called police unit, and handed over our privileges and powers and gave them the authority to police over us. So that instead of me coming to you for your eye, I report to the police to take care of my grievances. That was the beginning of policing the way we know it today. So it is true. The creation of policing was as a result of people surrendering their powers to an entity to manage the community. So that's what I wanted to speak about on that one. But that does not speak to what Professor is saying about our constitution. Constitutions came about as entities and nations came about. In the UK, like you know right now, they have no constitution. Up to now, they have no constitution.
The Magna Carta.
It is called what?
Magna Carta?
Not even Magna Carta. There's something they use, but they have no written constitution in the UK. And that's why I'm saying when the policing, when it started, there was no constitution, there were no laws, there was nothing. So the people surrendered this thing to them. And then because the British were all over the world, the empire, the whatever, and I think they were a major empire for about 200 years. The longest, I think, because the rest, the Alexander the Great, Bonaparte, they never stayed long like the British. So because they don't have a constitution, this thing evolved into a system. Now the people started discussing how to manage the police. Because at some point, they started overstepping themselves. So that's when the issues of an act of creating the police came about. And that's why we picked from the rest of the world, picked from that. When you go to Russia, they have their own systems. But eventually what has happened is the people, even in Russia, as a federation, because the USSR came after the Second World War, they also surrendered everything to the monarchy, who created the system to police the federation. So all this is about what we've done in the country. But they've talked so many things I wanted to rebut, I'm just forgetting. But this is what I want to say. As a country, we must learn from the past. I don't want to speak about what is going on now. There's no way we want to pretend that we can create a wheel now. Yet what is happening in this country has happened in many other countries. And we must learn. The government must sit down and study the evolution of riots, the evolution of demonstrations, the evolution of what the youth are doing. I don't want to look at it in terms of age. And I'll give you a few examples. Look at the French Revolution. Why did it come about? The people of France agitated for so many reforms, they never saw it. What was happening? The king and the emperor, whatever it was, kept on bashing them, kicking them until they invaded the palace. Let's go to the Bolsheviks. You know the Bolsheviks, yes. Lenin and whatever. The same thing. The Tsars were never allowing these people to. So they kept on demonstrating, rioting. At some point, the Bolsheviks decided, you know what? Let's walk to the Kremlin. Same thing with Chinese Communist Party. When they sent the fellows who are now in Taiwan, the same thing. So we must, as a country, sit down and ask ourselves, is this something new? So the fact that we are not allowing ourselves to study history does not mean we shall manage our youth. How I wish the likes of Charles Owino will be sitting with some people in this government and tell them brutish force will never solve the problem that the youth are looking for. The youth want answers. The youth have asked us to do 1 or 2, 3 things as a country. The youth are not seeing it happen. Do we deal with them by killing them? Do we deal with them by arresting them? Do we kill them by truncheoning them in the streets? History must guide us. And that is what I think this country has refused to learn. You can never, never kill your youth to retain power. At some point, you'll give in. And that is what is called statecraft. Statecraft is not about saying, tutawachapa, musikuje kwa street. No, statecraft is about thinking through things, deciding how you want to do things. How does the government work to ensure that whatever is happening in our country has some, because I'll tell you this, history has told us you can never bludgeon yourself to stay in power. It might take 10 years, it might take 20 years, but at some point, those agitating will get what they want. So me, I'll advise the government of this country that yes, as much as you want to do what you are doing, history is, and you see they say history repeats itself. You can do whatever you want to do. The British were merciless during the Mau Mau rebellion. They were merciless. When you read the history of the Mau Mau and the British, the way they were dealing with Kenyans, you will not believe at some point they'll give in to give us independence, although it was on paper. But at some point, they felt we can't continue jailing, detaining, killing, mass massacres. At some point, they gave in and surrendered to what the Kenyans were looking for. This is my advice to this government. Today, when I was watching what was happening in this country, I didn't expect the magnitude that I saw. I thought it will happen in Nairobi, and I was actually shocked that this thing was all over the country, and that speaks to something. I'm praying that some people in this government can sit down and say, what can we do? I want to repeat, you cannot bludgeon, you cannot kill to retain power. At some point, it will let go. Now, let me come to the issue about the rioters themselves. The police, let me talk about the two. You see, if you have asked for permission, not permission, you have notified about your demonstration, picketing, for the fact that you went to ask for that, no, to notify, it means you are following the law. And because you wanted to follow the law, if the police tell you we shall give you escort, then follow the law. What we are seeing about some youth who are infiltrating very good intentions people who are demonstrating, that they are becoming violent. Now, how do we expect, and I'm not speaking for the police, I've worked with them together for many years, but this is the reality on the ground. When you go, you've decided because you think you want to follow the law. You've gone and notified the police, you've agreed on what you need to do. At some point, it transforms from a demonstration, a protest, into a riot. Now, if you're going to riot and burn cars, steal, that is no longer a riot.
It's no longer
It's no longer a protest. And that calls for a way the police are supposed to deal with it. And I'm not saying the police are doing the right thing, but you see, the fact of the matter is, when you transform from a protestation, and that's why I was speaking the other day that the police need to be trained also,